Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. My name's Tom from Moto-Resto LLC here in Bradenton, Florida. Thanks for joining us today on another episode of an epic restoration or repair. Who writes this shit? Yeah, we got a new job in the shop, and she's a big girl, but remember, big girls need love too. So let's go ahead and give her some, shall we? All right, folks, here we go. This is the next job. It's not my bike, again, it's customer's bike. 2000 Valkyrie, Honda Valkyrie. Nice bike, 6-cylinder, basically the wing engine of the time. Horizontally opposed 6 and 6 carburetors. And of course, it doesn't run. The brakes are completely frozen or almost completely frozen. Thing has got a ton of problems with it. And so my understanding is from the owner's son, I've only chatted with the owner via text and phone call. He wants this repaired so it's in good running condition so he can sell it. He doesn't ride anymore. All right, so first problem I had with it was I wanted to look inside the fuel tank, but the fuel tank cap here was completely frozen. I'm going to show you what to do to get that done. Probably should have filmed it, but I didn't. Here's one way we can loosen up that frozen fuel cap on the tank. Just kidding. Essentially what ends up happening is these guys here, which are the latches, the actual latches, you see them, how sticky they are? They're still sticky. I need to probably disassemble this cap. But what you end up having to do is you have to just use patience and penetrating oil and go down through. It'll be locked in this position. When the key won't come out until it locks. And so these things spread out, these little tangs. And this is spring loaded, and that keeps pressure between this holding it from the bottom and the spring loading from the top. That's what gives you your seal. And then there's an internal vent. Well, there may be an internal vent on this cap, or it may be vented elsewhere. I'm not really sure. I don't see any other exposures or any penetrations for it. So what you do is, again, you work penetrating oil down in these and wrap it with a small ball peen. No kidding. With a small dead blow, just lightly around it and start to get it to freeze up. As soon as you can start to get it to move up and down where this spring part starts to move, you just keep wiggling the key back and forth. Now, if you know what direction it goes, then it's best. But once it starts to go, in the case this one goes to the right or clockwise, once it starts to go, you know that it's not going to go any further to the other way, so you know that's not the way to go. You just keep going in the direction that you were going in, where you saw some movement. And so once you get that, then again we can get it to release and then open it up. You need 2 hands to do it because you got to push this in and then turn the key while this is open. That's another safety feature, I guess, or I don't know why it's that way. The key will not come out unless it's released. It pushes some sort of a object out of the way, and then these are extended. I'm going to leave them that way because let me show you what we got inside. All right, let me see. We'll try to use the light on the camera here to, yeah, you get an idea right there. Wow. Now I'll go over the story here as far as how long it's been sitting and so forth in a minute, but take a guess while you're watching this, how long, based on that tank presentation, do you think this thing was sitting? Here's multiple choices. 5 years, 10 years, 12 years, or 18 years. Have you made your choice? It's been sitting for 10 years, and if you chose that one, you win a Moto-Resto LLC see-through t-shirt with fake nipples embroidered into the chest. But no, you don't, because I only have one of those and I adore it. So anyway, I am going to give you nothing, but you have the satisfaction of realizing that you are pretty smart. So it's been sitting 10 years, and the brakes are, as I said before, are froze up. I'll talk about that here briefly, how you can do the unfreezing temporarily to move it around. The rears are usually not the problem. It's the fronts that's the problem because it's dual caliper, and chances are it's one of the two, not necessarily both. But anyway, so it's been sitting 10 years. This owner, apparently his brother, about 10-12 years ago, was killed over in Sturgis. I remember it somewhat. It was a local police officer. And I remember 10-12 years ago, because I was still on the job with the fire department, not in the same municipality, but we kind of share networking information when it comes to that stuff, even before it goes around necessarily to the public. And I remember that. And I'm like, oh, that's a dang shame. Well, this was the gentleman who owns this is his brother. So as soon as that happened, and the last registration date is 2013, he parked it, didn't ride it, with the intention of selling it. But he never sold it. So it would sit for how many years, and then he'd have to have it fixed again. The son said he's had this done at least 2 times. In other words, repaired so it's running and rolling and saleable, I guess would be the word. Hopefully this will be the 3rd and final time. But it is in pretty bad shape. I wanted to give it a bath before I put it up on the lift, but it was raining this morning. It wasn't supposed to rain at all today, and of course now it's clearing up. But it was raining pretty hard this morning, and I had to get some stuff moved around. I don't have a whole big footprint here, so I had no choice. And plus I have to drag it up with the winch. I have a special connection for the winch here, because it's so heavy and the brakes are all bound up, like I said. So I had no choice but to put it on. I think so. I'll go to the brakes right now, because I think I'm going to tackle these first. Normally these calipers will freeze up in the pistons pushing outwards, of course, and they're locked up against the rotors because unless it's dual piston on opposite sides, which these aren't. You know, you have pistons on one side and a fixed pad on the other. These will rust jack out just like any other thing, and the corrosion will push these things out and lock up also around the barrels of these pistons, and so they won't retract at all. Of course, the fluid is hygroscopic, brake fluid, so it attracts moisture. Moisture causes corrosion, and these get locked up. What I generally do with them is I simply loosen the 2 caliper bolts, and then I tap it with a dead blow, like a small one, just lightly, or just hard enough until you get it to wiggle. When you can feel it wiggling, it'll roll. But if you hit the brakes again, say goodnight. You got to do it all over again. So that's one way you can do this. Simply opening up the, crack in the banjo here is not going to help, because it's not a pressure problem on the compensation on the top of the master cylinder. This is a problem down in the actual calipers themselves. All right, so to summarize this intro, semi-long fart knocker intro, what I'm going to do on this is I'm going to have to reach out to the customer immediately and tell them that this tank is in really, really bad condition. And in my experience, when they're that bad, if you put the phosphoric acid in and whatever else you're using to clean them out, there's a really good chance that they're going to develop pinhole leaks. So I'll try it, but I'm going to have to ask him if he even wants to do that, because if it develops pinhole leaks, we're going to have to replace the tank with a used one. And all the other work I got to do on this thing, if you add up a cost of a new tank, if it's, or rather a replacement tank, if it's several $100s, I don't know what it is. He's going to be approaching the cost that you can even get out of this thing selling it if it was, good sitting here. So basically, I'm going to have to ask him about that, because we got to pull the carbs. This whole rack has to be pulled. There's 6 carbs, as I said, 3 and 3, and I have a special kit for it. Rebuild kit, and then we're probably going to have to unrack all the carbs and clean and re-O-ring all the connectors and da-da-da-da-do-do-do, all that stuff. So I can't remember if there's a fuel pump in here or not, to be honest with you. If there is, we have to clean that out. I don't remember. And then, the fuel cock, that probably needs to be rebuilt. So there's a lot of detail work in the fuel system that needs to be addressed. And like I said, with that fuel tank that bad, I'm not sure if he's going to want to do that. Most likely, we're going to rebuild the clutch slave. That's actually, you see that doodad right there? That's the bleeder for the clutch slave. It's not too hard to get at. And so we'll have to rebuild the clutch slave. I have experience with those on Valkyries, and you might as well just do it, because if it's been sitting, it's gonna leak. And of course, the master for the clutch and the master for both front and rear brakes. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. I think I'm going to tackle these front brakes first, so I can at least get them working after I pull the tank, before, once I talk to a customer. We'll get that soaking, and then I'll pull the calipers. We'll see if we can get them at least loosened up, without taking them apart. There's a couple tricks you can do for that, and I'll show you. And then put them back on, and then if I can do that and get the thing to roll easily, I'll go ahead and back it off, get it out of here, and give it a bath before we take anything else off. Okay, so I want to fix the front brakes at least temporarily, again, so I can get this thing off and on the lift. If you don't have your hand on the brake coming back down the ramp, it's going to get away from you, so that's very unsafe. So what we're going to do here is how I do this, even if I was doing it more, you know, for a permanent repair. Got to start from the top. Got to get any old fluid out that's up in the master cylinder for the brake. And then we're going to go down to the calipers and bleed them. Try to get this re-bled, and then bleed them with fresh fluid to get them down to the calipers. And then we'll take the calipers off, and I'll show you what I do, a little trick to try to break them loose, at least temporarily, like I said. And something that's been sitting like this for 10 years, it's not going to be a permanent fix. I'm going to have to rebuild them. And so, but right now, like I said, for our purposes, I want them to get them work so the front wheel's not dragging. I mean, you'd hit these brakes now, the front wheel nearly locks up permanently. So the way he's got these bars raked is not really conducive to doing this the way I want to do it. So I'm going to loosen up the bolts, cap bolts there, that hold this handlebar, and I already marked a spot the customer had them at. We'll just reset them, you know, at a later time, but just going to crack these if possible. Ugh. Oh boy. These can be real tricky because of those screws being frozen. And again, this has been sitting for a while, which it has. You're definitely going to use, you have to use a JIS appropriate screwdriver. These are JIS screws, undoubtedly. Japanese industrial standard. All these Japanese bikes use those, and some Chinese stuff too. If there's any gunk inside the screw, you want to make sure that's out. You got to get a really good purchase. Oh, these are loose. Son of a gun. Awesome. Oh, thank God. These can be a real fight sometimes. Your rubber damper in here. These are notorious for swelling up. And this is a baffle, this little floaty guy. What it does is it keeps the fluid from, you know, sloshing around when you're moving, and taking a chance of possibly getting air into the bottom of, you know, where it discharges down through the banjo and through the line. Yeah, looks like sweet tea. Normally I suck this out with like a bulb syringe, and I know I bought a new one, and for the life of me I can't find it. Yeah, it'll work. The bulb syringe I had is pretty old, and it succumbed to the chemicals. And I remember going to the grocery store not too long ago and going into the, you know, the baby section over by the pharmacy, and I picked up a new one. And like I said, I cannot find it. I don't know where it is. There's another like baffle, a damper piece in here. It's kind of just sits on the top of the compensator where it comes back, because that'll squirt up, and what this does, it deflects it so it doesn't squirt up and go all over the place. It just sits in there. It's not a big deal. Sometimes they're wicked corroded and you gotta replace them. It's right there. See the little tiny hole? So it squirts up from there, and this thing deflects it again to keep it from squirting all over the place, especially when the cover's off. So that's all that does. And these little tangs on it that keep the thing from, you know, keep it in place. And like I said, I keep these in stock. And around the actual, that boss there, you see it's about 2/3 of a circle. And that is also a damper as well, because again, it helps keep the fluid where it needs to be, because that bigger hole is where it goes down into the piston of the master cylinder to create hydraulic pressure for the calipers. So this again is a little damper like you'd find in a gas tank, where they have like damper sections, and that keeps the gas from sloshing around too much, where it gets away from the fuel pickup and would introduce air. This kind of does the same thing in concert with those other parts I already took out. I want to get some fluid in this off camera and also bring the lift up somewhat, because, you know, I'm old and creaky and it's difficult to work down low like that anymore, especially on my knees. So stand by. Lift sounds like me when I get up in the morning. Okay, so we're looking at the caliper, but I'm also checking here, and you can see this discoloration and a bunch of like wetness here. So we got probably fork seals issues too. And these are inverted. They're somewhat more difficult to do than the standards uprights, where this section would be in the triple tree versus this. So I'll bring it to his attention, but I seriously doubt that we're going to be getting into that far. I think he just wants us put back together into a rideable and saleable condition. But of course we can't do that with a safety issue, and that would be brakes. Speaking of brakes, we're on the right side caliper, and this is already loose. As I indicated before, I took the bolts loose and gave it a couple of wraps. These rotors are toast too, probably below spec, so we'll have to measure that, but there's a big line right here, so these things are probably gone. And most likely that's because this thing's been dragging for a while, even when it was on the road. Even 10 years ago, probably the brakes were dirty, you know, the calipers were sticking back then. It's probably the case. So I want to undo the restraint here. Oh, okay, we got it out. And that way I can kind of hang it from a bungee a little bit easier, and I can show you what we're going to do. These are 12s, 12 millimeters. Sometimes they're 14s. It's going to be either 12 or 14 if it's OEM or stock hardware. I've never seen them any more than that on just about anything. Now, since I kind of wrapped these around a little bit before, they're a little bit loose, but because of that ridge on the rotor, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get these off. I'll just try wrapping them backwards. Again, this is not a pressure issue in this line. Popping this bleeder ain't going to do nothing because it should be going backwards. We can do it just to see. It is a possibility, but it's usually the calipers are completely stuck, so the calipers aren't going to move anyway a whole lot. Pistons, that is. Not necessarily pressure buildup. If you have a clogged compensator hole up there, yes, but for the most part, it's not it. These are 10s. Most of them are, well, I shouldn't say most. A lot of them are 8 millimeter for the bleeders, but these are 10s. Those are on there. Look at that. You know what? That's like water. It smells like brake fluid with the consistency of water. And remember, brake fluid is hygroscopic. It attracts moisture. So the longer it sits without being changed, the more moisture it's going to absorb, and then it'll turn into a... Alright, I'm going to... because that's fresh fluid coming through now. So that started to make its way down, which is fine with me. We essentially just bled the system from above, at least. Let me go ahead and work on this, and off camera I'll get this one freed up. Well, sometimes you just got to beat them off. I won't say any more about that comment. They're just stuck. There's your pistons here. We're going to take these apart as far as getting the pads out. We have to do this operation. To do that, you got to get this out. This is a plug. It's a regular slotted plug, and then there'll be a hex pin with a hex on it. That probably 5 millimeter, and then we have to break that loose and back the pin out. And then we can just essentially rotate the pads out of the way rather, and then we can get that out. And then take a look more closely at the actual pistons. Sometimes that plug is stuck in there too. There's your hex. That's 5. I can just tell by looking at it, it's 5 millimeter. Yeah, it ain't coming. We got to do Ugga-Dug here. Mini Ugga-Dug. Okay, I'm going to turn the light a little bit so you can see it. Now here's, I guess you can't see it still. Here's our pistons. There's 2 of them. You see all that shit that's around them? It's just dark. That's supposed to be shiny metal. And it's not. Now what we need to do is we need to get to the shiny metal, and these are out about maybe a halfway, maybe a little bit less than halfway. Those pistons are actually pretty long. You see the bottom of them? Pretty deep. Actually maybe a quarter of the way rather. So you can push them out pretty far. That's really pretty imperative to do this particular trick or kind of quick service. What we need to do is push these out. So with the hydraulics of the actual caliper and the master cylinder, and get these exposed to a point where you can get in there and start cleaning them. The key here is you can only do one side at a time, because naturally if you had the other side off and you started to apply hydraulic pressure, the other side is going to come out and you're going to be like, what's going on? And the next thing you know, the pistons fall out of the other side and you're like, oh shit. So do it one side at a time, leave the other ones in. If you have the other piston off, you just got to clamp them so they don't move. You can use a C-clamp with a piece of metal across that, whatever you want. But I just have the other side in, and we'll swap these back in, and then with those pads even, and then we'll do the other side later. All right, so you saw before when I opened that up, we run some fluid down, some fresh fluid. It kind of self-bled the master cylinder, so I am getting some pressure up in here. So I'm going to try to set you up a little bit better to see it. The light isn't so good here, but it's the best I can do right now. You can see I got a little bit of metal there, so clean. So what I really do is, you can do this with tools or whatever. Usually I just hold it, and usually my fingers are pretty strong, so I can just hold it and force the other one to come out, unless the other one's really stuck, and it probably is. That's the one that's really stuck on this one. This one's moving, so that one's stuck. And that's not unusual. So we'll go ahead and we'll get a small C-clamp on this to hold it in place, and then we'll push some hydraulic, pressure through and get this other one to come out. We want them out about equal. These welding clamps work pretty good for this. All right, so now we got the other one coming. And we're getting low on fluid. I can hear it, so it doesn't matter. I mean, if it gets a little air in there, I'm not concerned. We're going to re-bleed them anyway. I'm going to get this one out a little bit further. About there. Then we'll go ahead and release this one. See if we can hold this one. These may not go. Oh yeah, they will. Go out that far. Push again. See, this one was definitely a lot easier. Alright, that's good. We've got them out about where I want them to do this. See, that's how they should look. So, the problem with these is they get all gooey and dirty, and they develop a little ridge. You can actually feel that ridge right there. And so that ridge acts like a physical check valve almost. There's a ridge right there. That's what really prevents that from going back in, plus all this sticky, gooey stuff. So there's a couple of ways you can deal with this. One way I've been very successful with is actually to use Simple Green. Simple Green is it's more of an enzyme type degreaser, I think it was. And it's not going to hurt anything else in here, even if it got in there a little bit. But I don't have any anyway. I'm out of it, and I'm certainly not going to use Purple Power. We will hit these with brake clean, but not right away. First thing I'm going to do to clean these up is simply take a toothbrush and some silicone spray. And we're going to start working these with some silicone spray and a toothbrush. You'd be surprised how much of that crap you can get off. This is a silicone lubricant. It says, I called it silicone spray, but it's the same damn thing. And you can get in here and get a lot of this stuff off with it. It's really hard to get this part down here underneath it. There's just not a whole lot of real estate there. You just do the best you can with it. Like I said, this is a stopgap measure. This is not a permanent. It could be used as an emergency measure, but it's really just a stopgap measure right now. We're just going to temporarily get these things working properly so we can use the brakes and get this thing on and off the lift. Because after I do this, I want to get it off the lift again and take it outside and give it a bath. I don't want to work on it like this, even before I pull the tank or anything. Anyway, I'm going to get these clean as I could, and then we'll turn the camera back on. Alright, so as you saw, I used a little bit of Scotch-Brite too, and I took the arm off too, the back arm. It just pops off. You don't have to if you can get in there. It's just an extra step that I have to do now to put it back together, but, just a little grease and pop it back in. Speaking of grease, there's a special grease that comes with these kits for motorcycles when you buy them. I usually buy my stuff from Brake Crafters out in Arizona. They're really, really good, have very high quality stuff, and that's where I'll be ordering the brake stuff for this. One of the other things I wanted to do in this particular operation was to reevaluate or evaluate the actual condition of these. I don't like the pistons. I don't really like using an abrasive on them, but these steel ones you can get away with. The ones that are made of I don't know if it's magnesium or whatever the hell that other material is. The Concourse 14's got them. Other kind of sport bikes have them. You absolutely don't use any abrasives on them. In fact, they don't even say to use anything except alcohol or brake cleaner on it. And that's what I do on the Concourse. I use either brake clean or alcohol. These are steel, though. You can get away with it, and they're pretty trashed anyway. We can, like I said, this is a stopgap. If I can reuse these, because I can't really see the bottoms yet, but if I can reuse these, what I'll end up doing is putting them on the lathe and doing each side with some 2000 grit, and I'll polish these things up and they'll be fine. As long as there's no big pitting. That way I'll only need to order an actual packing kit. The seals in brakes, they call them packing for some reason. I don't know. The outside thin one is a dust seal or dust packing. The inside one's the main packing, the thicker one. Alright, so I want to make sure that my fluid in the master cylinder is not too high, because when we push these back in, remember, I did add some. It's going to overflow. So I just have to keep my eye on that. Put a rag up here to catch any. This is what I do. Take some silicone spray again and douche these down like when you were cleaning them. And then you should be able to push these in by hand. If you got strong hands, you should be able to move these by hand. Now, these may not go because they're so screwed up, but it's a good test. If you can push these in by hand. Man, these are tight. So these, it may not work. Usually I can get these where I can push it in by hand. Now, all is not lost though. See, that's the problem with taking that damn arm off. You just can't hold this with the bungees too well anymore. The other thing we're going to do is we can exercise these. Now that we put some silicone on them, we can take another pair to hold the one that isn't being compressed, and then we will compress the other. And I probably should have mentioned that before. You really need to exercise these in and out a few times, and then you should be able to push them. Sometimes these have to be pushed directly straight. You know, this thing is not reaching the bottom of the actual piston, so what it's doing is it's trying to make a cattywampus. So what you do is if you can get a flat gizmo in there, and if this will go wide enough, like a washer or something. I don't know if these are going to go big enough. I might have to use my big ones. Well, we'll see. We might be able to get some success. We push it in. There we go. See, we got to push it in, you know, square. All right, so we'll watch the other one, make sure. All right, so now we're going to push this one in even further. You don't have to go all the way in, but, you know, pretty far. Because you want to drag some of that silicone and spray in, really. See, it's not being so naughty now. That's good enough. Now we'll put this back in just to retain it. Probably end up doing this a couple of times. A little tedious with the tools, opening them up, closing them, opening them up, closing them, but you get my drift. This one is smaller than the other one, so we'll have to get the bigger one, if it'll even go in there. Yes, look at that. Perfect. And this has got some nice flats on it. Sometimes these fit, sometimes they don't. It depends on the caliper. Alright. Remember, watch that master. You don't want it overflowing and getting on your paint. Wow, that one is really tight. There must be some real junk up in there. Alright, starting to go a little easier now. Now, I'm going to leave this in here, this other one, and push this one back out. Because this one, this naughty one, we want to go ahead and take care of. The other one's behaving not so naughty. You know, it's not unusual. I found that it's just one caliper piston or the other. It's not both. Or it can be both, but not unusual at all. It's being a little less naughty. Yeah, it's getting better though. So sometimes you got to work these things 3-4 times to get this, but it's, you know, it's a hell of a lot easier than trying to take them all apart and re-bleed them. And especially if you're going to do it anyway and you don't have the parts. You know, if you don't have the parts, if I had the parts, I'd just take them apart and do them. But I don't have the parts right now, and I need to get these serviceable. Yeah, this one's the real tight one. Alright. Well, this may not work on this, but it may be good enough. Yeah, this one is just really, really bad. Oh, there it goes. Look at that. I was wrong. So it is getting better. Okay. This is how you can tell you got it. Now, I want you to take a look at that piston as close as you can. I'm going to put this at an angle. Hopefully get some light in here that's a little bit better. Right here is what I'm talking about. Now watch when it comes out. And when I release. Out and backs off. Out and backs off. You see how it backs off a little bit when you release? That's what this needs to be doing. That's proper operation, because that's that backing off, that relief that it gets from, you know, basically not keeping pressure onto the pads. This is what you should be seeing. All right, so we got this one nailed. I can tell you right now we got this one nailed. The other one, I don't know. I think this is probably good enough to do what we need to do. I think it'll still drag, but it won't be locked up. So what I'm going to do is now is put this back together off camera. You saw me take it apart and move over to the other one. I'm not going to film that one either because you already saw this. And then we'll see if we were successful. This left one, I wanted to show you one thing here. This one is really, really stuck. Remember that slotted plug here was on the other one. This one was froze up. I had to use I had to use this one to get that off, the impact. So that one's out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pin out that holds the pads in and try to rotate this thing off the pads. Because it may come off that way better. than trying to beat it off, because I'm telling you, this is the one that was really causing us the problem, I guarantee it. And of course that is froze up too. And so now we've got our situation here we're going to have to deal with. Aha! Aha! Yeah, don't be afraid to hit these with heat. Not too long, but remember, these calipers get pretty damn hot if you're riding down the road and using them a lot. So, you know, you can heat them up pretty good and get that out like that, because otherwise that's going to cause a world of problems. Mainly because, you know, you have just a big outside thread and a little 5mm hex. So if you strip that out, then you're into drilling and using easy outs and stuff. Really, really stuck. Made some progress here. It may have helped, it may not have, I don't know. But hey, we got them out, and hopefully the rotor's not tweaked. But like I said, they're scrap anyway, most likely. But we'll try to save them nonetheless. Yeah, yowzers. We may be buying pistons after all. Alright, side stands up. Let's see if it works. Woohoo, not bad. This front wheel was locked up before. It's still dragging, you can hear it, but then again the rotor's all full of gunk too. So, let's see. Let's get her off. Oh, it's a little skidding, but that'll work. It's not perfect, but it'll do for now. She's still dragging a bit, but I couldn't even push this before. Okay, so I think I'm going to end this one now. This will be part one. We went over a lot of stuff here, showed you the tank, talked to you about what the plan is for that. But you can see what I needed to do here. I mean, this thing is just an absolute pigsty. I'm not going to work on it like this. So it needs to be, you know, taken and put outside, probably in a burn pile, but I didn't say that. And then, you know, I'll wash it off real good, and then we'll put it back on the lift. How I get it back up is I actually have a winch set up with a jumper pack that hooks up to the front of the lift, and I can pull it right back up. That's how I got it up there, and even with the front tire just about locked up. So it'll be a hell of a lot easier now. I'm just going to back it up straight a little further. We'll get it bathed, and then we'll put it back up there, and that'll be it for my work today at least. And this is it again for this video. So next video we're going to do is we're going to get into pulling the tank and taking a look at what's underneath there, but focusing mainly on the tank itself, because I got to see if this tank is salvageable. The only way I can do that is to clean it and de-rust it, and that means putting some sort of a chemical in it, and this is so bad it needs to be done with phosphoric acid. The brand name is Ospo, and that works out really well when the tank is really, really bad. You just got to be careful of the paint for overspill and so forth, but I've done it so many times I'm pretty good at it now. So if we can save this tank, that's going to be the way to do it. And no, there won't be any recoating or any protective coating put on there. I hope there's not one in there now, but I'll know as soon as I start cleaning it. So anyway, if you liked what you saw, don't forget to like the video, subscribe if you want to catch the next and be notified of the next videos that are coming out on my channel. Till then, as always, ride safe. Thanks for watching. There, that feels better now, doesn't it? I didn't mean it when I called you fat.